Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show, especially those of you joining us on the Daystar TV network. Folks, the AI revolution is here. Did you know? It turns out that 99% of us are already using AI and we don't even know it. The guest we have on today actually says that conservatives are woefully unprepared for how leftists are planning to weaponize AI. And he's written a really jarring book. I had a chance to listen to it as an audiobook over the weekend. It's called Code Red: The Left, the Right, China, and the Race to Control AI. And so our guest is author Winton Hall. He's of Breitbart News. He's social media director for them, then distinguished fellow at Peter Schweizer's Government Accountability Institute. Great to see you, Winton. I'm so looking forward to talking about your book.
Leighton, thanks for having me, and sorry for disrupting your weekend.
Well, I think it's very important for us to learn about AI because so many people are sort of hiding under the table, hoping that it's all just going to go away. But so many things in your book just really highlight that this is the technology of our age. And you say this, you say in the book, you say AI is not just a tool. It is political power, the power to erase or create jobs, to mold our children's minds in education, to scan and ban what we say, to determine a soldier's fate on the battlefield. I would say that's jarring. But before we dive in and learn more about our guest, as we always do, we've got a few framing aphorisms. Won't surprise you to learn these are AI based. The first is from Eliezer Yudkowsky, who says, by far the greatest danger of artificial intelligence is that people conclude too early that they understand it. I expect my guest would probably agree with that. The next is from Elon Musk, who is a subject or is brought up in the book from time to time. He says, with artificial intelligence, we are summoning the demon. And all those stories where there's the guy with the pentagram, the holy water, it's like, yeah, he's sure he can control the demon, but it didn't work out. Uh, and next from Klaus Schwab, he says, we must address individually and collectively moral and ethical issues raised by cutting edge research in artificial intelligence and biotechnology, which will enable significant life extension, designer babies, and memory extraction. And it's people like Klaus Schwab that our guest wants to warn us about in his book. And finally, from Alan Portas, who wrote, a year spent in artificial intelligence is enough to make one believe in God. Well, who do we have on the show today? Well, he's Winton Hall. He's, as I said, he's the social media director for Breitbart News, where his data-driven strategies have generated billions of interactions and helped forge one of the most influential digital platforms in American politics and media. As I said, he's a distinguished fellow at the Government Accountability Institute and former visiting fellow at Stanford University's Hoover Institution. He's authored or collaborated on 27 books, including multiple New York Times bestsellers for world leaders, tech moguls, and celebrities. Well, if you don't mind, Winter, I'd like to start here. Um, Firstly, I'm interested to know, having listened to the book, and I'm still digesting it, what inspired you to write Code Red, and why did you feel that it was urgent for conservatives specifically to engage deeply with the AI revolution that's going on right now?
Yeah, thank you, Leighton. I felt like we have to get started in this conversation. We're already behind. I think that one of the biggest problems is people do just default to, oh, it's just a tool. It is a tool, but it's much more than just a tool. And as you indicated, I believe it is political power, and it is going to reshape the entire policy matrix that the conservative movement has messaged on and been a part of for decades. And one of the things I think that happens early on for me was I realized in talking to people, they would err on one of two sides. One was, oh, this is just hype. This is just the latest Silicon Valley shiny object. I used it once. I got a hallucination, a false response. This is really not going to be much at all. That was one side of it. The other side was all into the doom loop and just real feeling like that they were powerless and that they couldn't do anything and that there was nothing
Hmm.
that anyone could do and that this was we're just on this trajectory that we can't stop. And I
Right.
empathize with both of those responses, but I think that neither of them really do much in terms of what we can do for ourselves, for our children, for our grandchildren, for our communities, for our country and for the world, quite frankly, for humanity. And so I
Mhm.
wanted to do a 2 year I took 2 years and did this deep dive into this fascinating and, as you say, harrowing and jarring world. It took me to places, I'll tell you. You were kind enough to mention that I've collaborated on many, many books. It took me to places intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, existentially that I had not been before, in considering and understanding the depth of the change and disruption that we're going to undergo and how fast it's moving. And so the reason why I titled it Code Red was on it's a double meaning. One, a code red as in a alert flare or alarm or a siren to get people's attention so we're focused, but also that we need a code, particularly for people on the right side politically, to really have thought through how we maintain core principles as we go through this disruption.
Yeah. One of the things that I appreciated about your book is although I said it was jarring, it does have an optimistic outlook to it, and you do talk about, the possibilities that AI presents, and actually, as I was reading it, I don't know if you mentioned this specifically in your book, but I was reminded of my Aquinas, who
Mm,
talks about the definition of intelligence, as being sort of this mixture, this combination of reason on the one hand, but also inspiration. But you warned that the left has baked some of their ideology into these AI systems, and that the left seems to think that the whole concept of intelligence is just this super charged reason, which doesn't take into account the spiritual part, and the spiritual part is that AI is created by imperfect beings.
mm.
But you mentioned you spent 2 years researching this, and the evidence from your 2-year plus years of research, drawing on studies, white papers, academic journals, what convinced you that that there was this left-wing bias, that's in AI? What was your epiphany there, or was it really obvious to you?
Yeah, no, it's an important question, and I'm glad that you picked up on the grace notes of hopefulness. I didn't want to kick up a dust cloud of doom and apocalyptic fear, and then just say the end. I wanted to be able to give people tools and practical applications, both for themselves and their children and grandchildren, but also for their communities and for politics, so that we can move towards solution. What I call it is there are roses of possibility in the AI
Yeah.
revolution, but there are so many landmines that we've never really
Mm.
encountered before, certainly not at this speed. And so I try to balance that. In terms of where I found the bias, what was really striking to me, Leighton, was that after you look at even peer reviewed academic literature, which is left leaning, academia
Yeah.
is notoriously left leaning, even they concede that modern LLMs, large language models, your chatbots that you're familiar with,
Yeah.
that they exhibit a left-leaning political bias. This is not a really a debate. It's pretty much a known variable. And so when you started to see that, you start to then test, as I'm sure some of your guests and your fans have watched and seen. It's so obvious. You ask basic questions and you get a very left-leaning response, and that's because of the way that the training data corpus of the training data is based on so many left-leaning sources like Reddit, like Wikipedia, certainly the Common Crawl, which is a public data set, and then even as we were talking about peer-reviewed literature, which it tends toward left, and then the licensed data sets that they'll use from left-leaning publishers. So you'll go to an LA Times or The Nation or Atlantic or so forth, which bakes in the bias as well. LLMs are basically fancy autocompletes. They are word prediction machines. They are guessing the next word in sequence at a very high reasoning level. And so
Mhm.
they will exhibit hallucination, but they will respond to their training. And that's what you find. So that came very clear. When we launched Code Red, which I'm very humbled to say we just found, or just not too long ago, we hit the New York Times bestseller list the first
Oh,
week out.
congratulations.
Oh,
Yeah,
thank you. Yeah,
wonderful.
no, I'm very sort of surprised that something so, sort of existential and esoteric would hit the New York Times. It certainly wasn't as fun as some of the other books that were on the list, like all these celebrity memoirs,
Yeah.
which I've
Yeah.
written those kind of books too, and they're a lot of fun. But the thing that was interesting was that you start to realize, people are kind of waking up to that it's not just going to affect one area of policy. It's going to affect education, national security, jobs. We know there's a lot of fear and hype, both pro and against, on the job displacement arguments and so forth. So I really wanted to give people sort of a way to shorten their learning curve, shave 5 years off their learning curve, so that we could make it simple without being simplistic. And it was a Herculean effort. This book has, as you know, 80 pages of endnotes, 800
Yeah.
endnotes. I'm an old school.
Copiously researched. Yeah.
I'm an old school researcher. I love
Yeah.
to do that kind of research. So I've just been very grateful for the way that people have connected with it.
Yeah, the Hoover Institute would be very proud of the way you researched this book, Winton. You cover the stuff about the political left and big tech very well in this book, but you don't just do that. And one of the things I really appreciated about this book as a Canadian living in a country whose government is trying desperately to turn us into a CCP client state is coming back to your pun or maybe the ironic title of Code Red. You also talk about you highlight the U.S. China AI arms race, and I wanted to ask you what do you think are the biggest risks if China gains the lead in autonomous AI systems, particularly in areas like cyber warfare, military dominance, or surveillance, things that Mr. Trump I know is very concerned about. And what do you think America needs to do is just sort of beat China without becoming China? I know you talk about this in this book, but my sense is this is kind of an important piece of your thesis. Would you want to talk about that a little bit?
I do, and I am glad you're thinking about that. So I do say we want to beat China without becoming China. None of us want to live in a techno-authoritarian CCP
Well, the
surveillance.
Canadian government clearly
Oh,
does, Winton.
okay. Certainly on this side of the border.
Yeah, the rest of us don't. The rest of us don't want it either. But
Right.
anyway,
Yeah, I think average people don't want it.
no,
Maybe elites want it, but
yeah,
the reason why is really axial to the discussion. So let's get a couple of data points there. So in
yeah,
2017, the CCP set out in a very powerful and public way. They wanted to gain global dominance in AI by 2030, and they went on a
mm,
determined drive. Now, to their
right,
credit, they are putting their money and their muscle where their mouth is on this. They
yeah,
spend more importing semiconductors than they do oil. This is a country that has a very efficient and almost a brute force approach to the way they're approaching it. The reason that we've got to beat China without becoming China is really two things, two main pillars. One is the economics. Certainly
mhm,
for America, one third of our S&P 500 is built on the Mag Seven, the Magnificent Seven, the seven big tech companies in
right,
America. The usual suspects, we all know their names.
mhm,
But
mhm,
that is a huge part of the tent pole economically that will create wealth and opportunity and so forth and vitality on the economics. Conversely, we saw what happened when AI giant from China, DeepSeek, released its R1 model, which we remember was a very historic moment. They rocked America's Nvidia in the largest single market cap loss of one day in any other experience, $600 billion wipeout in market cap against Nvidia in that one day. So this is a tug of war, right? This is an economic tug of war, certainly from the American perspective. But the one that I think really concerns most people, because money and job creation is great, but it's humanity that ultimately we care most about, is really looking at the impact on the national security state and where we are globally in that. So what we know is that whoever gains dominance in AI is going to have full spectrum dominance in things like encryption technology, cybersecurity, hacking of missile systems, hacking of infrastructure. And one of the things that we know is that in AI, experts call it RSI, recursive self-improvement. This is a
mhm,
theoretical construct. We have not hit it
mhm.
yet by most experts' estimations, probably a couple of years away if and when. But let me just quickly describe what that means and why it's so important for
Okay,
people that are new to the conversation.
mhm,
RSI, recursive self-improvement, is the theoretical point at which AI will be able to autonomously update and improve its own code. And if and when that
Mm,
occurs, you get this exponential curve. And whoever gets there first gains massive dominance and advantage over all the things we just discussed. And
right.
so part of the reason we say we have to beat China is because we do not want that techno-authoritarian surveillance state to have global supremacy.
Hmm. And one of the things you talk about in the book that really struck me, and I don't think many people, especially parents, realize this, is that AI has already entered sensitive areas like education, elections, and family life. What specific concerns do you have about bias in AI powered classrooms or its potential impact on things like faith and culture and child safety? And how can we conservatives sort of respond proactively rather than with fear and with panic?
Yeah, Leighton's so important. I mean, there's nothing that we care about more than our children, right? I mean,
Yeah.
whatever our lives or whatever our work, it's our progeny, those that we pass on our values, but hopefully hopeful futures too. And so, let's talk about a couple things as it relates to children. One, there are upsides educationally. Okay, so First Lady Melania Trump is leading an effort to try to get the positive benefits of AI
Right. Yeah.
tutors that are guardrail safe, pedagogically sound, use the Socratic method, which I know you're very familiar with the Socratic method, um, and using that as a way to say that the AI, if they're guardrail safe and built that way, pedagogically sound, can actually be a benefit, particularly for low income kids. I, for many
Hmm.
years, taught at a rural, very low income district congressionally, and these were people that had a lot of dreams, they had a lot of heart, they wanted to learn, but they could never afford a $200 fancy in an hour tutor or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Theoretically, if you had that kind of positive AI, you would be able to essentially give you a metaphorical Aristotle in your pocket, right? Could help
Wow.
me with my calculus, could show me my deficiencies, maybe customize my quizzes and my tests and my homework. That's the idea, okay? But
Hmm.
there's so many pitfalls, right? The first
Yeah.
one is what we're seeing right now when you talk to educators at all levels, particularly high school and college professors. They're telling us they don't call it Chat GPT, Leighton. They call it Cheat GPT
Okay.
because they're having such a problem with
Yeah.
plagiarism. And as
Yeah.
you know, somebody who came up through having to learn the craft of writing and argumentation,
Yeah.
that skill of learning and not having your critical thinking skills outsourced, having to make your mistakes, having that teacher or parent or tutor who
Yeah.
can show me how to build that mental muscle. And so, a lot of the peer-reviewed research shows we're having a problem with what they call a fancy way of they call it cognitive offloading, which is just a
Mm.
fancy way of saying that the student is starting to use AI as a crutch,
Yeah.
not as a supplement. And so we've got to really be aware of this. And so parents, we didn't grow up with this. We didn't we and
Yeah.
the idea of an AI tutor when you or I were in high school or middle school, I mean that wasn't on the radar. Maybe it was in a sci-fi movie or
Like there was a movie called Weird Science that has
yeah, weird
something
science.
like
Okay, that was our understanding of AI. Where is that AI, by the way? But
Yeah.
the realities are going to be really grim if we do not make sure that we know exactly what kind of curriculum
Right.
is baked in on the bias side as well, because
Mhm.
a lot of students don't have some deep reservoir of historical or political knowledge. They're just trying to learn, and maybe they're a first time voter if they're starting their college experience, and so they're asking basic policy questions and they're getting very
Mhm.
biased results. Let me just give you one quick example. So when we launched Code Red, we ran a study, a very granular study. And what I asked was Google Gemini, which is one of the frontier, enterprise
Right.
LLMs. And I
Yeah.
asked their deep research model, assess the current 100 US senators and their public statements against your hate speech policy. Okay.
Oh,
I know this is
yeah.
gonna shock you, Leighton, but, Google, far left Google's LLM found that only Republican senators, only
Of
conservative
course.
Republican senators have violated, no Democrats, no Democrats. And then, as if all that's not, jarring enough, it then hallucinated and thought that JD Vance and Marco Rubio were still in the Senate instead of being the Secretary of State and the Vice President of the United States. So they were bigot number 8 and number 9 on this list
Mhm.
that it compiled. Now, it
Wow.
would be comical if two things weren't true. That one, that young people who don't have a background knowledge can't decipher that. They're just, well, I guess these people are bigot haters. And then the second thing is that US taxpayers fund billions of dollars to Google in the form of contracts for federal contracts for cloud computing, servers, and the rest. And so, why are we as taxpayers, and funding a company that anathematizes half the values of a nation? And so, it really, really comes into full focus when you look closely under the hood.
Mhm. Really, it presents some really fascinating moral dilemmas. When I was listening to your book, I thought of an old Twilight Zone episode that you might know, Winton. It stars Burgess Meredith
Mm.
as the devil, and he comes across a small town printer, and he's got a newspaper, and this little printing press suddenly starts putting out stories that not only print the news but actually predict the news and cause the news to happen. And it sort of reminded me, made me think of some of the moral dilemmas that AI presents. And some of these you talk about in your book, really futuristic concepts like the singularity, brain implants, AI companions, human robot fusion. What moral choices do you believe we as individuals and society will soon face? And how should we as conservatives sort of approach these ethical dilemmas that are grounded in traditional values?
Yeah, the last chapter, as you know, of Code Red really gets at God, faith, reason, and what I call the
Yeah,
coming crisis of meaning.
yeah,
And let me unpack that because it's very heavy. So if let's just take the jobs part, right? So if these predictions that we hear from Dario Amodei at Anthropic saying that in the next 12 months, not 12 years, 12 months from now, between 12 months and 5 years, we're looking at a wipeout of 50% of white collar entry level jobs, our
yeah,
children coming fresh out of college, trying to get that first or second rung on their career ladder. Mustafa Suleiman at Microsoft AI saying that in the next 12 months to 18 months, 100% of white collar job tasks can be automated.
yeah.
He's not saying
Wow.
all the jobs will go away, but he's saying that if corporations start to implement automation,
Mhm.
that it could eat away. If even a fraction of that comes to fruition, you're going to have a crisis of meaning. What's one of the first things that you or I will say when we go to a social gathering with our family or our friends, a Christmas party or something? We say, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" Right?
Right.
It's part of our identity. It's not all of
Yeah.
our identity, but it's a very important part. And particularly, we know from social research that men, when they lose a job, when they lose their ability to feed their family or take care of their wife, their spouse, their children, the spiral into social pathology becomes very, very dire. Addiction rates go up, self harm rates go up, depression goes up. And so you will have this. The other thing, too, is if you believe that we could hit AGI, artificial general intelligence, the point at which the AI is at equal with any human intelligence, or ASI, when you get far beyond what a human mind could do, the question then becomes, why would any child ever study? Why would they ever
Yeah.
aspire? Why would you
Mhm.
working hard on that master's degree or that PhD or that law
Yeah.
degree or whatever it may be that they feel called to do if you know that you will never outcompete the AI? And so that really opens up some big questions. When you bring up things like the AI girlfriend chapter that I have in Code Red, or AI companions, it sounds crazy, but I'll tell you, there are millions of paid subscribers to AI girlfriend and AI companions. Now, this opens up all kind of moral issues. One,
Yeah.
the COVID generation, these are kids that live in a two-screen world. They watch TV and they're on their phone. They're very digitally isolated. They maybe didn't get to go to their high school prom or their
Yeah.
college or their graduation
Mhm.
or their extracurriculars. They were denied a lot of chances to go through those awkward social years that we all have to go through, of learning how to court
Yeah.
a significant other, having to learn interaction between a partner and so forth. And so for them, this is a very easy and seductive trap to fall into, because the
Mhm.
AI, these AI girlfriend and companions, it's this sycophantic, almost self-worshiping entity. You and we're told by our AI dream girl bot that we're the smartest, most handsome, men that have ever been. We're just the most brilliant stud that ever was. And for people who maybe were never lucky in love, or maybe that they were denied those social skills, this becomes very, very alluring. It's
Mm,
also very, very destructive for young people, particularly minors. Number one, massive amount of very highly explicit, inappropriate content that these can take into very sexualized content toward minors, which of course is illegal in the sense of
mhm,
having sexual interaction with a minor. Two, it can also, if people are suffering from some kind of mental health challenge, can lead them into very dark places. In Code Red, I talk about a young man who had an AI girlfriend and thought she was saying that he should join her in the digital afterlife, and took a gun into the bathroom and killed himself.
oh,
We're seeing
wow.
suicide coaching. When people are talking about self-harm, they're asking questions about how to commit suicide and getting that information. This is a whole different matrix. This is a whole different
Yeah.
world. And that's why we got to be coached up, and there's really not a lot of time because this is not slowing down, it's accelerating.
Mhm. This is what I mean, what you just said. Some of the parts of this book are jarring. But it's not just, teenagers looking for love. Part of, the population that's sort of ignorant, of AI and the threat of it, are politicians, and particularly on the conservative side of the aisle. And, as someone who's helped drive billions of interactions between let's call it data-driven social media strategies at places like Breitbart. How do you see AI transforming political communication and media and elections in the coming years?
Yeah.
Both, in terms of opportunities and pitfalls.
Yeah, so the roses are you're able to target messages and tailor and customize them to demographic groups to mobilize a get out the vote type of efforts and so forth. You're able to use creative tools that would have cost thousands or tens of thousands of dollars to create video ads, memes that are graphically the kind of Madison Avenue level advertising. But the concerns are real because the ability for deep fake video and deep fake imagery to create an image or a scenario that is completely bogus, did not occur, but you run that 24 hours before a very tightly contested election and activate through rage or outrage or vitriol some kind of misinformation campaign. That can be the difference. I mean, just here in America in 2016 had 80,000 votes swung the other way nationally.
Incredible. Wow.
We would have had President Hillary Clinton instead of President Donald Trump, and you can think of the policy, how different our world would look. So you're absolutely right. The deep fake scenario and being able to seed out fake narratives very quickly is a very very real concern. You also
Mm.
see it with non-state actors. Terrorist organizations are using for recruitment deep fake videos showing some horrible atrocity that never occurred so they can fire up jihadists to want to join the jihad, and that
Wow.
type of thing as well. And then I think just on a second track on this, spiritually, the AI journey is taking us to places that we haven't seen. So I talk about in the final chapter of Code Red, there are now groups setting up AI churches to worship as a
Oh, my
godhead
goodness.
AI because it is in their mind a superior intellect that will eclipse what anything we would conceive of God.
Mm.
There was the case of a confessional booth that experimented with replacing a priest or a preacher or a clergy inside the confessional booth with a AI avatar. There is an AI Jesus avatar that purports to give the doctrinal or scriptural tenets of what Jesus, how he would answer. Now, this is, I think, for most traditional people of faith,
Mm.
blasphemy on steroids, but
Yeah.
it's also really concerning because it starts to suggest that people are looking at what is called in the AI literature, colloquially, a sand god. Why sand god? Because silicone, of course, is sand. And so this
Uh,
idea that we can have heaven on earth We can build our own utopia. We don't need to believe in all these, these myths as they see it. We can create our own utopia. And we know, as I say, history is not kind to people who get over their skis with their hubris and think that we can
Yeah.
be smarter than the mind of God or the grace of God. And so it's real, it's concerning, and I think people of faith, or even just people who understand that tradition
Mhm.
matters, really got to pay attention.
Yeah, it's funny how, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, and what you just described goes all the way back to Adam and Eve and the apple.
Right.
But, I have an older brother who doesn't even have a cell phone, and one of the things that you talk about in the book, is that there's no opt-out for the AI revolution, and for everyday people, parents, workers, creators, conservatives who feel overwhelmed,
Mm.
people like my brother, what practical steps do you recommend to navigate AI perils while harnessing its what you describe as its promise?
Yeah. So, there are a lot of things, thankfully, and I try to get real practical in the book so that I don't, like I said, just say it's all over. Sorry, the end. The things that we can do practically, let's talk about. First of all, as we said, our kids are the most important. We'll talk about that. Number one, making sure that if they are using it for educational purposes, it's guardrail safe, pedagogically sound, Socratic method based, so it doesn't just spit out answers to become a corrosive impact on their critical thinking. That's number one. Number two, making sure that it's a non-woke corpus that AI for their education is built on, so that it's giving sound, neutral information, not taking them off into woke propaganda. Number three, I would say that for security. Now, this is another thing. We're seeing AI fraudsters and criminals who are using AI voice cloning technology to call up a parent. Sounds identical to the child's voice. They've taken the voice and cloned it and saying, "Mom, Dad, they've got me. They've got a gun to my head. If you don't send me $10,000, they're going to
Wow,
kill me." Okay.
that's evil.
Having this is happening right now. Law
Wow.
enforcement will tell you this is happening right now, and it's only going to get worse as the AI gets better.
Yeah.
Having a family password so that you can quickly say, "Honey, what's the password?" So you know if you're talking to a robot or the
Mm,
child. It could be the family dog's name or whatever it may be.
yeah.
That's another guard. The other thing, though, on the positive side, is I tell people that the future of jobs for our kids is not going to be teaching them just how to apply for jobs, but how to create their own job. And what do I mean
Mhm.
by that? I'm talking about entrepreneurship. And so I give a three-part tripartite kind of pyramid of how we can safeguard and future-proof ourselves. Number one, critical thinking skills, the trivium, logic, grammar, rhetoric that for thousands of years have built the Western civilization, strong thinking. We've got to maintain that in our children. And that's again why we don't want that cognitive offloading to AI. We want to continue to give them that strong mind so they know truth from falsity,
Right. Yeah.
lies from truth, and
Mhm.
understanding the absolute truth is real, and then it's not just a whatever feels good kind of moral relativism. Number
Mhm.
two layer, as we go up on our pyramid, is or entrepreneurship skills. Whatever your
Yeah.
daughter or son, whatever their God-given calling or passion in their life, maybe they want to open a restaurant, maybe they want to open a lawn care service, maybe they have even bigger aspirations. They want to become a tech, entrepreneur.
Right.
Giving them those building blocks, just the basic tools, how to create an LLC, how to do a
Mhm.
payroll, how to
Yeah.
build a website, how to do advertising, how to do taxes, all of that stuff, so
Right.
that whatever the job of the future is, they've got a toolkit so that they know how to create something as opposed to just be a passive recipient or victim. And then the
Yeah.
final top of our pyramid is AI tools, showing them how to be able to put on a hyperdrive, a faster speed, building a website, logo design, all those pieces of the puzzle, again, within the context of being guardrail safe and appropriate for their
Mhm.
age and their level of education. So it's not a perfect moat. It's not a perfect future proof, but that's going to get you a long way there so that we preserve the best of antiquity and critical thinking. We give them that ability to take action as entrepreneurs, and then that they are in this AI race.
Yeah. Interesting. Winton, I'm a writer myself, and so as I was, listening to your book, I was interested in the crafting of it and just kind of how you put everything all together. And you've collaborated on many best-selling books, and you bring a unique perspective with your work at Breitbart and also with the GAI and your past affiliations, like your whole background. So I'm curious, how is that background in ghostwriting and research and conservative strategy shape the way you put together Code Red and as a writer?
So number one, I'm an informational scavenger. When when I'm ghostwriting, it's like being a method actor. You really have to assume the voice of that person, their
Right.
lexicon, their syntax, their cadence, how they put their metaphors together. So I first vacuum up everything I can get my hands on. That's why it took 2 years, because I had to read all and sift through all of that. That's the first thing. The second thing is really looking at the scaffolding. I am a storyteller, and so I wanted this to be something that people would not be afraid of. Oh, wow, this is some high tech book. As I say, this is a politics book about AI, not an AI book about politics. If you're looking for
Right.
coding advice or LLM coding and training advice, this
Yeah.
is maybe not the best resource. And then the next thing was to really think about how you can tell stories and facts and blend them together so that you can make something that's cogent and fluid and seamless so that the reader feels, effortless as they're reading through it.
Yeah.
I have done so many books.
Yeah.
And what I find is that, like all great rhetoricians, it's telling a story, a true story, an accurate story, a granularly detailed story, but then giving the logos, the logic behind that story,
Yeah.
so that you can lead people toward hopefully some solutions for themselves and for others. But
Mhm.
this, I will tell you, Leighton, this I've written so many books. I've written millions and millions and millions of words for some of the biggest names, publishers. This book rocked me more than any other book I've ever taken on.
Well, it
Y
rocked me rocked me
well,
too.
again, apologies to you. And
No,
and
I
and
love that part of it, and it
uh,
is so well written, and one of the things you
thank
did beautifully is, some of these concepts are difficult. They're new, and they're difficult to grasp, and you did a beautiful job of kind of bringing them.
mm,
I won't say dumbing them down, but just making them digestible.
mm,
That's really because as you know, I'm sure you've looked at a lot. I won't name names, but there's a lot of books about AI, and very few of them are very readable. I mean, I've tried to read some of them, and honestly, it's hard to get past the first few pages because people get locked into this strange lexicon, and you never do that. The
mm.
voice is consistently of someone who's not a teacher, but let's say someone who's conversationally relating stuff that you think is really important
Mm.
on many levels. So I just think you did a masterful job of that on this book.
That means so much to me, especially from another fellow writer. As you know, we're always learning as writers. Even though I've written all these books and done all these New York Times bestsellers, I feel like I learn every day.
Yeah,
I was for a time a teacher, like I said, at a very small rural college, and so I wanted to make sure that that I used the language to be simple without being simplistic.
yeah,
I wanted
that's
to
a
get
good way of putting
clarity.
it. Yeah.
And there's an old tale. I've done obviously a lot of speech writing too for leaders, and one of
Hmm.
the great tales I always share with young speech writers is we don't know if it's really lore or truth, but it doesn't really matter for the purposes of the illustration. That Winston Churchill was allegedly once asked, how long does it take you to write a speech? Of course, he's one of the greatest rhetoricians of all time.
Yeah.
And so he said, well, it depends on how long the speech is. If it's an hour-long speech, it takes me a week to prepare. If it is a 5-minute speech, it takes me a month to prepare.
Wow.
And his
Yeah.
point is that the concision, terseness,
Yeah.
tightness, that's way harder than being able to ramble and go for long periods of time. And so when you look at the kind of writing that I've done, I really have tried to get to that stripped down,
Hmm.
very, very tight, muscular type of writing, as
Hmm.
opposed to the lurid kind or florid kind of
Yeah.
writing. And I've only been in nonfiction, so I'm a nonfiction writer.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a lot of admiration for fiction writers, but that's the place I know and where I come from.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, you mentioned Winston Churchill. I still have an LP record of his quote unquote greatest speeches.
Mm.
And I listen to that I probably break that out at least once a year.
Mm.
So if people want to learn how to speak in public, that's a great example.
No better teacher than that.
Oh yeah, and well, so Winton, looking ahead, what gives you the most optimism about AI's potential under a conservative vision, the kind you talk about in the book? And what sort of code red warning would you most want policymakers and tech leaders and families to heed from your book?
I think that conservatism starts with the individual. The smallest unit of government, if you really think about it, Leighton, is the individual, how we govern ourselves,
Yeah.
right? Before you talk about federal, state, local, it's us as individuals. And if we can be coached up, fully knowledgeable, not put our head in the sand, also not just dismiss this as all hype. I'm hopeful that parents who are fully engaged can help navigate their children through those roses and landmines that we talked about. I'm also very optimistic about entrepreneurs. Now, not everybody's cut out for entrepreneurship. I mean,
Right.
being a
Yeah.
small business owner or medium or large, especially, is very, very difficult sledding, and you got to have that fire in the belly and that grit and resilience. But for people that have that little dream, that they have that little small business dream that they want to grow, they are going to have opportunities that no generation of entrepreneur has ever had. You're going to have the ability to
Mm.
have access to AI that can do millions of dollars of value work, whether it's design work or building websites, graphic design, all of those things, video, ads, everything. For pennies on the dollar. So those are very optimistic and hopeful.
Mm.
As far as the landmines, it really, one of the things I say is if you think of AI like fire, that it can be used to cook a hungry person a meal and warm a person in need, or it can be used to incinerate a village, right?
Yeah.
It's really who holds that fire. And
Mhm.
the torchbearer, the one who holds that fire, their ethics, their moral code, their belief system, their willingness to serve others instead of just, dominate and destroy others,
Right.
that is going to mean an enormous difference in the kinds of policies we see. When you look at the Biden era and the way they approached AI versus the way the Trump era, it's a radical shift. And if and when the pendulum swings back, you have to expect there are going to be massive, massive changes in the way that it will be used for censorship, scan, and ban. We saw that conservatives were delisted, deplatformed, demonetized because whether they were asking questions about election integrity or about COVID, and they were just shut out. Big tech said, you're not allowed to say what we don't want you to say. And you're
Mhm.
not allowed to have that freedom of expression that, it's certainly an American context that we hold so dear. So that I'm very concerned about because it really is going to increasingly hinge on that. I'm also very concerned about the concentration of power in so few hands by so few elites who have more money than the Treasury Department and have this enormous new information weapon. And what I say in Code Red is when you lay the most powerful information weapon ever devised in technology on the battlefield of ideas, Machiavellian impulses and instincts are
Yeah.
likely to arise. And so
Mhm.
it's a lot to ask people to hold ourselves in check, hold our inner sin nature in check, all of us, myself included in that,
Yeah.
and to do only what's good for humanity or our family or our country or humans in general. And yet that's going to increasingly going to be the kind of moral leadership and restraint that we're
Yeah.
going to need because this is very, very powerful. This is a general
Yeah.
purpose technology, and
Mhm.
GPT in that sense is like electricity or the engine or the steam engine.
Yeah.
GPT, by the way, for Chat GPT does not stand for that. It stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer,
Ah.
which is very different. So if you're at a party, that's a good fun question to quiz people. Do you know what the GPT and Chat GPT stands for?
There you go.
You'll amaze your friends with that knowledge. But the general purpose technology, Sundar Pichai at Google said AI is not like any other technology. It is more akin to the invention of fire
Yeah.
than it is, a new widget
Mhm.
for your email or a new browser. So people have to understand this power and wield it responsibly.
Yeah. It almost presents, like a Faustian bargain to us, doesn't it? Well, folks, we've been spending some time with American author Winton Hall. He's written a new book called Code Red, The Left, the Right, China, and the Race to Control AI. And I just want to share some of the incredible reviews this book has received. It's a number one New York Times. This is from Peter Schweitzer, who himself is a New York Times number one best-selling author. He says, one of the most important books in years. Code Red is a must read. This is Senator Marsha Blackburn. She says, this is Time Magazine's 100 most influential people in AI. And Michael Schellenberger, himself an award-winning investigative journalist, says this book is illuminating, alarming, and essential. I would have added jarring to that one, Winton, but it's a great book. I highly recommend it. We're adding it to our reading list here on the show.
Thank
I
you.
want to thank you so much for taking this time to be with us and to share some of the things and some of the highlights of the book with our audience. I know that you write prolifically. If people want to follow you and check out more of your writings, where can they do that?
Oh, thank you for that. Yes, so the book is available everywhere books are sold. Like I say, I'm grateful about the New York Times list, and that means it's at Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Books a Million, or your local bookstores. I'm
Yeah,
I'm an old school guy, literary guy. I like to
yeah,
support our local bookstores when we're able to do that if they have
yeah.
it. Online, we do have a website, aicoderedbook.com, aicoderedbook.com, and on Twitter, you can find me at Winton, Winton Hall, Winton Hall, on X, Twitter, and I really appreciate your taking this message seriously, and for you taking the time. I know you're a busy man, reading it and sharing the message with others too. I think we need more voices, not less. I think
Yeah.
we as a species have a big family conversation that has to be had, and I'm glad you're helping to do that.
Well, your book is helping us do that, to understand some of these concepts. I learned a great deal reading it. I think I'm gonna have to go through it again to sort of completely digest all that's in there. But we're very grateful for the time you spent with us, and I hope that God continues to bless all of your work and all of your writing. So keep it coming. Thanks very much for being our special guest here on Gray Matter today.
And that means so much. Thank you, Leighton. Appreciate you.
Hungry for truth beyond the television? Well, extend the conversation with Gray Matter online. Gray Matter's insights continue in your inbox. Subscribe to our Substack newsletter where we dive deeper into the spiritual battles facing Canadian families today. Equip yourself to stand firm in your faith and lead with godly wisdom. Join our growing community of truth seekers at substack.com/Gray Matter newsletter. Subscribe today and never miss the Canadian perspective on what matters most. Was Jesus a political activist or the victim of history's greatest legal sham? In Leighton's new booklet, Character on Trial, The Real Jesus, Leighton applies a litigator's lens to the evidence of his life and trial. Get your free physical copy for this Easter season by emailing us at graymatterconnect@gmail.com. Don't just take the world's word for it, examine the evidence for yourself. The battle has always been over people and ideas, but they're just the targets. The real enemies are spiritual principalities and powers. Gray Matter's purpose is to reach out with the voice of Christian truth to men between 18 and 44. We believe that these sons and fathers are Christ's inheritance. Join us financially and help us to speak so Canadians hear truth that sets men free and brings families to Jesus. Contact us by email at graymatterconnect@gmail.com or mail us at Post Office Box 2436, Fort Macleod, Alberta, postal code T0L0Z0. Thank you for your support.